You grew up with them. The heroes of the Old West. Wyatt Earp, Doc Holliday, Billy the Kid. Names carved into the very rock of history. But what if I told you the greatest hero of them all, the bravest, the deadliest, the most legendary, was erased? Not by accident, by design. His story was stolen, his face covered, and for 90 years, you loved the legend they built upon his absence. This video will change everything you think you know, and the truth is stranger than any fiction. The Old West was brief, perhaps 30 years. But in those 30 years, thousands of people lived lives that defy imagination. Why then do you only know a dozen names? The answer is simple and unsettling. History isn't a record, it's a choice, and someone chose which stories would be told and which would be forgotten. Not because they were less important, but because they were inconvenient. What was left behind wasn't lost. It was documented, verified, in plain sight, but it was never repeated enough times to become real to you. Until now. 5 gunfighters. 5 legends that history tried to erase. And the last one is the most shocking because it's linked to one of the greatest icons in American culture. A legend you've known since childhood. And the truth behind it is a secret that was kept for almost a century. Prepare yourself, because this is the story they didn't want you to discover. Before we dive into number 5, consider this. You know the story of Wyatt Earp, the gunfight at the OK Corral, Tombstone, Arizona. You know all of this. And you've probably never been to Arizona. You've never read an original document about Earp. You've never seen the court records. But the story is in you. How did that happen? How does a narrative become so deeply ingrained that it feels like a memory, not received information? This is the power of repetition. It's not a conspiracy, it's a selection. And the same selection that put Wyatt Earp in your mind kept 5 other people out of it. People with more impressive feats, more documented courage, more cinematic stories. Their absence from your memory is not an accident. It is a choice. And now, let's reveal the first of them. Number 5. Pearl Hart, the last outlaw. May 30th, 1899, Globe, Arizona Territory. It's a hot afternoon. A stagecoach carrying 5 passengers moves along a dusty road. 2 figures step into the road in front of it. One is a nervous man named Joe Boot. The other is a 5-foot-tall woman dressed in men's clothing. Her name is Pearl Hart. She holds a .45 revolver. This is the last stagecoach robbery in American history. Pearl Hart and Joe Boot take the passengers' money, a diamond ring and a pistol. They disappear into the desert. The chase lasts 2 weeks. They are caught. Pearl Hart is put on trial. 2 separate juries refuse to convict her. They are charmed by her. They are captivated by her story. She escapes prison. She is caught again. She serves her time. She dies quietly in a small town in Arizona. Almost nobody comes to the funeral. Her story, the last stagecoach robbery, a woman who charmed juries and escaped prison, quietly filed away. Never repeated enough. Never made into a legend. That's number 5. And number 4 is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about Wyatt Earp. Number 4. Elfego Baca,
The Bulletproof Lawman. New Mexico, 1884. A 19-year-old named Elfego Baca is deputized. He's barely an adult. He arrests a cowboy for disturbing the peace. His friends, 80 of them, surround Baca in a small adobe shack. They demand the release of the cowboy. Baca refuses. They open fire. For 36 hours, 80 men shoot at a single adobe shack. 4,000 bullets, 4,000 shots fired at a 19-year-old. Baca returns fire. He kills 4 of the cowboys. He wounds many more. When the shooting stops, Elfego Baca walks out of the shack, unscathed. Not a single bullet hit him. He becomes a legend in New Mexico. He becomes a lawyer. He becomes a sheriff. He becomes a district attorney. He lives to be 80 years old. His story: 4,000 bullets, 36 hours, 19 years old. A footnote. Never a film. Never a legend outside of one small corner of the world. That's number 4. And number 3 is going to make you question everything you thought you knew about Wyatt Earp.
Most people stop watching videos like this around now. They've heard a few interesting stories. They feel like they've learned something, but they haven't learned the most important thing. They haven't learned the mechanism. The quiet, invisible force that decides what you remember and what you forget. The force that decides who gets to be a hero and who gets erased. And the truth is, this mechanism isn't just about history. It's about your life. It's about the stories you tell yourself, the stories you accept without question, the stories that keep you comfortable, and the ones that get quietly filed away. The ones that could change everything. But you're still here, so let's keep going. Because number 3 is where the real story begins to unravel. Number 3. Clay Allison, the man who made Earp walk away. Dodge City, Kansas, 1878. Wyatt Earp is the lawman. He is the legend. He's the man who never backs down. On the same day, a man named Clay Allison rides into town. Allison is a known killer, a dangerous, unpredictable gunfighter. He has at least 15 confirmed kills. He's drunk. He's looking for trouble. He confronts Wyatt Earp. Earp, the legend, the man who never backs down, quietly leaves town. He avoids the confrontation. He lets Clay Allison have the street. Clay Allison dies a few years later, not in a gunfight. He falls off a wagon. His story? The man who made Wyatt Earp walk away. 15 confirmed kills. A footnote, never a legend. Because his story was inconvenient. It didn't fit the narrative of the invincible Wyatt Earp. And the comfortable narrative always wins. That's number 3. And number 2 is a woman whose courage defined a frontier and whose name you've never heard. Number 2, Mary Fields, Stagecoach Mary. Montana, 1895. A 63-year-old woman applies for a job. She wants to be a star route mail carrier. It's the most dangerous job in the territory. She has to deliver mail by stagecoach or on foot, through blizzards, through wolves, through bandits. Her name is Mary Fields. She's 6 feet tall. She weighs 200 pounds. She carries a shotgun and a revolver. She never misses a single delivery, not one. She fights off wolves. She fights off bandits. She becomes a local legend. The only woman in the United States to hold a star route mail contract. She dies in 1914, celebrated by one small town in Montana, unknown to the rest of the country for 100 years. Her story, the toughest woman in the Old West, quietly filed away, never repeated enough, never made into a legend, because her story was inconvenient. It didn't fit the comfortable narrative of who a hero could be. That's number 2. And number 1 is the story that will change everything you thought you knew about American pop culture. Number 1, Bass Reeves, the real Lone Ranger. Indian Territory, 1875 to 1907. A man rides alone. He is a U.S. deputy marshal. He is a former slave. He is the finest shot in the West. He arrests over 3,000 criminals. He kills 14 men in self-defense. He is never wounded. He is never defeated. He uses disguises to catch the uncatchable. He is known for his Native American companion. His name is Bass Reeves. He arrests his own son. His son had murdered his wife. Bass Reeves requests to take the case himself. He rides out. He finds him. He brings him in. His son serves his sentence. He is released. Bass Reeves goes back to work. He dies January 12, 1910, 71 years old. No film, no television series bearing his name, no statue. And 23 years after Bass Reeves dies, a radio program premieres. It's called The Lone Ranger, a masked lawman riding alone through the frontier, using disguises to catch the uncatchable, operating specifically in the Indian Territory, accompanied by a Native American companion, the finest shot in the West, never defeated. The creators of The Lone Ranger never publicly credited Bass Reeves. The historical connection has been argued by researchers since the 1970s. The direct attribution is debated, and I want to be precise about that.
But here's what is not debated. Bass Reeves did everything the Lone Ranger did. He did it first. He did it for real, in the exact territory where the story is set, for 32 years, without a mask. And for 90 years, a country grew up loving a character built from the outline of his life, without ever knowing his name. That's number 1. That's the whole story. I want to hear from you. Which of these 5 surprised you the most? Is there a name you think belongs on this list that we didn't include? Drop it in the comments. Tell me who your forgotten gunfighter is and why they were left out. I read every single one. If this is the kind of history you're here for, the names the textbooks skipped, the stories Hollywood buried, subscribe to The Vault. We go where the history books don't, and there are a lot more where these came from.
Subscribe to the American Vault. Turn on the notifications, because in a world of shadows, the only thing more dangerous than the truth is not knowing it at all. See you in the next file.